Have you ever been pushed out by the people you trusted most? Left in the cold by those you called friends? I'm Ellen, and this is my story of betrayal and the quiet revenge that changed everything. If you've ever felt invisible, stick with me. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and let's dive into the moment my so-called best friend broke my heart. I was 55, living in a small Ohio town where everyone knew your business. My life wasn't glamorous, widowed, kids grown, scraping by on a librarian's pension. But I had my books. They were my escape, my sanctuary. Every dog-eared novel on my shelf held a piece of my soul, stories I'd shared with my best friend, Margaret. For over 30 years, we'd bonded in high school over dog-eared copies of Jane Eyre, swapping dreams and secrets under the oak tree in her backyard. She was the sister I never had, the one who held me when my husband died, the one who promised we'd grow old together, laughing over coffee and paperbacks. Margaret started a book club 5 years ago, and I was her first invite. Every month, we'd gather at her house, 8 women, a mix of old friends and new faces from our church group. I'd spend hours preparing, scribbling notes in the margins of The Great Gatsby or Pride and Prejudice, eager to share my thoughts. My ideas weren't always flashy, but they were honest, drawn from a life of quiet observation. I thought those evenings were sacred, a place where I belonged. It was a crisp October evening, the kind where the air smells of leaves and possibility. I'd spent all week rereading Little Women, my favorite, imagining our debate about Joe's rebellion. I knocked on Margaret's door, pie in hand, heart full. But when she opened it, her smile was tight, like she'd been caught stealing. "Ellen," she said, her voice clipped, "we're a bit full tonight. Could you help in the kitchen?" "The kitchen," I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Margaret's eyes darted away, and she ushered me through the living room, past the circle of women, their laughter pausing as they glanced at me. I recognized them. Susan, the retired teacher, Linda, the yoga instructor, and Claire, the new girl, barely 30, with her influencer-perfect hair. They didn't say hello. They didn't invite me to sit. Margaret pointed to a stool by the stove. "You can keep an eye on the snacks," she said, then turned back to the group. Her laughter louder now, as if I'd vanished. I sat there, the hum of their voices filtering through the wall. They were dissecting Little Women, my book. Without me, Claire's voice rang out, calling my taste old-fashioned, and the others laughed. Margaret didn't correct her. My chest tightened, like someone had pressed a stone against my heart. 30 years of friendship, reduced to a kitchen stool. I wanted to storm in, demand answers, but my hands stayed folded, my lips sealed. I'd learned long ago that silence could be a weapon, one I'd wield later. I wasn't just hurt. I was erased. Margaret didn't just forget me. She chose to push me out, to make room for someone younger. Chenier. I could have screamed, but I'd spent a lifetime swallowing pain. My husband's death, raising kids alone, losing my job to budget cuts. I'd survived it all. This was just another scar. But scars don't stay silent forever. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, surrounded by my books, their spines, like old friends, staring back at me. I thought of every time Margaret had leaned on me, when her marriage faltered, when her daughter left for college. I'd been her rock, but now I was her kitchen help. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a mirror of every time society had told me I was too old, too plain, too invisible. Ageism wasn't just a word. It was the ache in my bones, the dismissal in their eyes. But something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet. It was a spark, a whisper of defiance. I'd always written in secret, little stories scribbled in notebooks, tales of women like me, overlooked but unbreakable. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to show them who I really was. Stick around, because this story's just beginning. You won't believe what I did next. That night, after slipping out of Margaret's house, I walked home under the glow of streetlights, my heart heavy, but my mind racing. The sting of her betrayal wasn't just about the book club. It was a wound that cut deeper into every moment I'd felt dismissed, invisible. Because of my age, at 55, I wasn't supposed to have dreams anymore. Not according to the world. Society expected me to fade quietly, to accept my place on the sidelines. But as I sat at my desk, surrounded by my books, their worn covers like a choir of old friends, I felt something new. A fire I hadn't known was still inside me. I'd always written stories, not for anyone else, just for me, late at night, after my kids were asleep, or when the library was quiet. I'd fill notebooks with tales of women who refused to break, women like my grandmother, who raised 6 kids through the Depression, or my mother, who worked double shifts as a nurse to keep us fed. Their strength lived in my veins, but I kept my stories hidden, afraid they weren't good enough, afraid I wasn't good enough. Margaret's rejection changed that. If she thought I was too old, too irrelevant, I'd show her just how wrong she was. The next morning, I opened one of those notebooks, its pages yellowed, but brimming with my voice. I read a story I'd written years ago about a woman named Clara, a widow who rebuilt her life after her family turned their backs. Clara wasn't me, but she carried my pain, my quiet rage. Her story felt alive, urgent, like it was begging to be told. I spent hours revising, pouring my hurt into every line. The words weren't just ink. They were my defiance, my refusal to be erased. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not my kids, who were busy with their own lives, nor my sister, who'd always said my writing was a cute hobby. I worked in secret, waking before dawn, my coffee going cold as I typed. The story grew into a novel, a tapestry of loss and triumph, of a woman who turned betrayal into power. Each chapter was a brick in the wall I was building, not to shut the world out, but to prove I still belonged in it. Months passed, and the book took shape. I called it The Unseen, a title that felt like a mirror to my life. Writing it was like breathing again, like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd buried under years of sacrifice. But doubt crept in, too. What if it wasn't good enough? What if Margaret was right, and I was just a relic, out of touch with the world? I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the fear that my story would be laughed off, just like I'd been. Then I found an online writing group, a community of strangers who became my lifeline. They were from all over Seattle, Atlanta, even London, writers of every age. But many like me, women in their 50s and 60s, tired of being overlooked. They read my drafts, offered feedback, and told me Clara's story wasn't just mine, it was theirs, too. One woman, a retired editor named Diane, wrote, "Ellen, this is the kind of book that changes people. Don't stop." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me out of doubt. I decided to self-publish. It wasn't glamorous. I spent hours learning how to format files, design a cover, and navigate online platforms. My savings dwindled as I paid for a freelance editor, but every dollar felt like an investment in myself. The day I hit publish, my hands shook. I wasn't just releasing a book. I was releasing years of silence, years of being told I was less than. The Unseen went live on a Tuesday morning. I didn't expect much, just hoped a few people might read it, maybe leave a kind review. But something unexpected happened. Readers found it. First a trickle, then a flood. Reviews poured in, calling it heart-wrenching. A love letter to every woman who's been underestimated. A book blogger in Chicago raved about it. And suddenly, my story was climbing the charts. By month's end, it was a bestseller in its category. With thousands of downloads, I didn't tell Margaret or the book club. I didn't need to. Word spread in our small town, as it always does. One day, I overheard Susan, the retired teacher from the club, at the grocery store, gushing about The Unseen to a cashier. "It's like the author knows exactly how it feels to be invisible," she said. I stood behind her, clutching my cart, my heart pounding. She didn't know the author was me, the woman she'd ignored in Margaret's kitchen. I smiled and walked away, the secret warming me like a flame. But the real moment was coming, the one I'd been waiting for without even realizing it. Margaret's book club had chosen The Unseen as their next read. They had no idea who wrote it, no idea the story they were praising was born from their betrayal. I knew I'd be at that meeting, not in the kitchen this time, but at the center, ready to reveal the truth. The weeks after The Unseen hit, the bestseller lists were a blur, a strange mix of exhilaration and secrecy. I'd wake up to emails from readers, strangers who felt like kin, thanking me for giving voice to their own quiet struggles. A woman from Texas wrote that Clara's story made her feel seen for the first time in years. A man in Oregon said he bought copies for his sisters, who'd been overlooked their whole lives. Each message was a reminder that my pain, my words, had power. But in my town, I stayed silent, letting the whispers about the book grow without claiming my place in them. I'd see Margaret at the post office or the diner, her smile as bright as ever, oblivious to the storm I was brewing. She'd wave, make small talk about the weather or her grandkids, never mentioning the book club or that night in her kitchen. I'd nod, my heart a tangle of old affection and fresh wounds. Part of me wanted to confront her, to ask why she'd pushed me out after all we'd shared. But another part, the one that had survived years of loss, knew silence was stronger. I'd learned that from my mother, who'd faced betrayal with a smile and a plan, never letting her enemies see her sweat. The book club's next meeting was set for a Friday, and I heard through the grapevine they'd chosen The Unseen. Susan, the retired teacher, had posted about it online, calling it a revelation, a story for anyone who's ever felt discarded. Claire, the young influencer, shared a selfie with the book, captioning it, "This is everything." The irony burned Claire, who'd mocked my taste as old-fashioned, was now posing with my words. I didn't let myself gloat. Not yet. I wanted to be there when they realized the truth, to see their faces when they learned the author was the woman they'd banished to the kitchen. I called Margaret the day before the meeting. My voice was steady, casual, as if nothing had changed between us. "Heard you're reading The Unseen," I said. "Mind if I join?" "I've read it, too." There was a pause, a flicker of hesitation in her voice. "Oh, Ellen, it's a bit crowded, but sure, come by. Maybe help with the snacks again." I swallowed the sting, agreed, and hung up. She still didn't see me, but she would. That night, I stood in front of my mirror, choosing what to wear, not the faded cardigans I usually wore to book club, but a sharp blazer and scarf, something that said I wasn't the same Ellen they'd dismissed. I packed my copy of The Unseen, its cover simple but striking, with my pen name, E.L. Harper, in bold letters. No one in town knew it was me not yet. My stomach churned with nerves. But there was a thrill, too, like the moment before a storm breaks. I thought about why this mattered so much. It wasn't just about Margaret or the book club. It was about every time I'd been told I was too old to matter, when the library cut my hours because younger staff were cheaper, when my kids assumed I had no dreams left, when the world looked through me like I was a ghost. Writing The Unseen wasn't just revenge. It was redemption, a way to prove I was still here, still vital. But standing up to Margaret, to all of them, would take more than words on a page. It would take courage I wasn't sure I had. I remembered a story my grandmother used to tell about a neighbor who'd cheated her out of a family recipe during a church bake-off. She didn't yell or fight. She just baked a better cake the next year, won the prize, and gave it away to the poor. "Never let them see you break," she'd said. I carried that with me as I prepared for the book club, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. I wasn't going to scream or cry. I'd smile, stay quiet, and let my truth do the talking. The morning of the meeting, I got an email from my editor, Diane, from the online writing group. She'd connected me with a local bookstore owner who wanted to host a signing for The Unseen. "They're calling you a hidden gem," she wrote. "Time to step into the light." I stared at the email, my throat tight. This was bigger than Margaret, bigger than our small town. But first, I had a score to settle, not with anger, but with the kind of quiet power that leaves a mark. I slipped a note into my copy of the book, a simple dedication I'd written for the club. It was my ace, my moment of truth. As I walked to Margaret's house that evening, the autumn air sharp against my skin, I felt the weight of every step. This wasn't just about a book club anymore. It was about reclaiming my place in a world that had tried to erase me. I stood outside Margaret's house, the same colonial with its tidy lawn and glowing windows, clutching my copy of The Unseen. My heart thudded, not with fear, but with a strange, electric calm. 30 years of friendship, countless shared secrets, and now this my chance to rewrite the story they'd tried to write for me. I knocked, and when Margaret opened the door, her smile was polite but distant, like I was a neighbor dropping off mail. "Ellen, so glad you could make it," she said, her voice syrupy. "The snacks are in the kitchen if you want to help." I nodded, my lips curving into a smile I didn't feel. "Sure, Margaret. I'll join the discussion first." Though her eyes flickered, but she didn't argue, just waved me into the living room. The circle of women was there: Susan, Linda, Claire, and the others sipping wine, their copies of The Unseen open on their laps. The air smelled of lavender candles and judgment. Claire was mid-sentence, gushing about the book. "It's so raw, so real," she said, tossing her hair. "The author gets what it's like to be overlooked." I took a seat, not at the edge like last time, but right in the center, my book resting on my knees. Susan raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Margaret cleared her throat. "Let's start. Ellen, since you're here, any thoughts on The Unseen?" Her tone was patronizing, like she expected me to stumble. The others leaned back, waiting for me to prove I didn't belong. I opened my book, my fingers steady despite the pulse in my throat. "It's a story about a woman who's underestimated," I said, my voice clear. "Clara, the main character, loses everything: her family, her voice because people think she's too old, too ordinary. But she finds a way to rise, to make them see her." I paused, meeting Margaret's eyes. "It's about what happens when you stop letting others define you." The room went quiet. Linda nodded slowly, like she was surprised I had something to say. Claire smirked, flipping a page. "Yeah, but it's fiction, right? Nobody really does that." I smiled. The kind of smile my grandmother taught me, soft but sharp. "You'd be surprised," I said. They went around the circle, praising the book's honesty, its heart. Susan called it a wake-up call for anyone who's ever felt invisible. Margaret, ever the leader, chimed in. "The author, E.L. Harper, must be someone special. I bet she's young, maybe in New York, living this glamorous life." The others murmured agreement, their voices tinged with awe. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. They had no idea. I waited until the discussion wound down, until they'd exhausted their theories about the mysterious E.L. Harper. Then I stood, holding my book up. "I brought something to share," I said, my voice steady but warm, like I was offering a gift. I opened to the dedication page and read aloud. "To the women of the Oak Street Book Club, who taught me the power of being unseen. Thank you for the lesson." The room froze. Margaret's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Claire's smirk vanished. Susan's eyes widened, darting to the book in her hands. "What do you mean?" Linda asked, her voice shaky. I turned the book to show them the dedication, printed in every copy, but I wasn't done. I flipped to the title page, where I'd written a note in my own hand. "From Ellen Harper, the author you didn't see coming." Margaret's face drained of color. "Ellen, you're E.L. Harper." Her voice was a whisper, like she couldn't believe it. I nodded. letting the moment sink in. I wrote the unseen after the last meeting. When you asked me to stay in the kitchen, I figured if I was invisible to you, I'd make myself seen by the world. Claire laughed nervously, like it was a joke. But no one joined her. Susan clutched her book, her eyes glistening. You wrote this. All of it. I nodded again, my smile softening. Every word. It's my story. But it's all of ours, too. Every woman who's been pushed aside, told she's too old, too quiet. I wrote it for us. The room erupted in whispers. Then questions. How had I done it? Why hadn't I told them? Margaret just stared, her hands trembling. I could see the guilt in her eyes, mixed with something else, envy, maybe, or regret. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth was enough, sharper than any accusation I could have thrown. I sat back down, letting them process it. My heart was racing, but I felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried too long. This wasn't just about showing them up. It was about showing myself I could still matter, still create something that moved people. But the night wasn't over, and I had one more surprise, one that would make this moment unforgettable. The silence in Margaret's living room was thick, the kind that presses against your skin. My revelation hung in the air, and I could feel every pair of eyes on me, some shocked, some guilty, some curious. Margaret's hands were still trembling, her wineglass forgotten on the table. Claire, usually so quick with a quip, stared at her copy of The Unseen like it might bite her. Susan was the first to speak, her voice soft but earnest. Ellen, I had no idea. This book, it's changed how I see things. I'm so sorry we made you feel left out. Her apology caught me off guard. And for a moment, I felt the old Ellen, the one who'd forgive too quickly, who'd smooth things over to keep the peace. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I'd spent months pouring my pain into the unseen, turning betrayal into something beautiful. I deserved more than apologies. I deserved to be seen. Thank you, Susan, I said, my tone calm but firm. But this isn't just about one night. It's about what it means to be dismissed, to be told, you don't matter, because you're not young or loud enough. Margaret finally spoke, her voice cracking. Ellen, I didn't mean to hurt you. The book club got crowded, and I thought you'd understand. Her words were flimsy, a patchwork of excuses. I looked at her, the friend who'd once known my every secret, and saw someone who'd chosen convenience over loyalty. I did understand, I said. That's why I wrote the book, to turn being unseen into something no one could ignore. The room shifted, the air charged with unease. Linda, the yoga instructor, leaned forward. How did you do it? Ellen, writing a bestseller, all on your own. I mean, you're, not exactly a writer. Her words stung, but I smiled, letting them slide off me. I've always been a writer. Linda, you just never asked. None of you did. I could have stopped there, let the moment simmer, but the fire in me wasn't done. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope, its edges crisp and official. There's something else, I said, my voice steady, but carrying a weight that made them lean in. The local bookstore reached out after The Unseen took off. They're hosting a signing event next week, and they asked me to invite the book club to a special reading. But there's a catch. I paused, letting their curiosity build. I'm not just the author. I'm also the new co-owner of the bookstore. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath. Margaret's eyes widened, her face a mix of shock and something like fear. You own the bookstore, she stammered. I nodded, my smile small but unshakable. I use the book's earnings to buy in. It's a place for stories like mine, for people like us people the world tries to forget. You're all invited, but I expect you to show up as readers, not as the ones who decide who gets a seat. Claire, who'd been silent, finally spoke, her voice sharp. So what? You're rubbing it in our faces now. You got lucky with a book, and suddenly you're better than us. Her words were meant to cut, but they only fueled me. Not better. Claire, I said, just visible. You called my taste old-fashioned, but you're holding my book. Maybe it's time to rethink what old means. The tension was palpable, but I didn't push further. I'd made my point. I gathered my things, leaving the envelope on the table, an invitation, but also a challenge. As I walked to the door, Susan called out, "Ellen, wait, can we talk? I want to understand." I turned, meeting her eyes, and saw something genuine there, a crack in the wall they'd built around me. "Come to the signing," I said. "We'll talk then." Walking home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The night air was cool, the stars sharp above my small Ohio town. I thought about my husband, how he'd always said I had a gift for words, how he'd urged me to share them. I thought about my kids, who'd never seen me as more than mom, and my grandmother, whose strength I channeled into Clara. This wasn't just about Margaret or the book club. It was about every woman who'd been told her time was up, every heart that had been pushed to the margins. But there was more to come. The bookstore signing wasn't just a celebration. It was a chance to turn the tables completely, to show my town, my friends, and even myself what I was capable of. I'd been unseen for too long, but now I was writing my own story, and it wasn't over yet. The week before the bookstore signing felt like holding my breath. My small Ohio town buzzed with talk of the unseen, and my name, E.L. Harper, was on everyone's lips, though most still didn't know it was me. At the grocery store, the cashier mentioned the book to a customer, saying it was like someone from here wrote it. It's so real. I smiled behind my cart. The secret, a quiet thrill in my chest. But beneath the excitement, I wrestled with doubt. Would they show up to the signing? Would Margaret face me? Or would she hide behind more excuses? And could I really stand in front of my town, no longer the invisible widow, but a woman with a voice? I'd spent years shrinking myself, nodding through dismissals, swallowing slights to keep the peace. My husband's death had taught me to survive quietly, to prioritize my kids, my job, my friends' comfort over my own. But writing the unseen had cracked that shell. Owning the bookstore, even just a share, was like stepping into a new skin, one that fit the woman I'd always been inside. Still, the thought of facing the book club, my neighbors, my past, made my stomach twist. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself I could stand tall. The bookstore, a cozy shop called The Open Page, was my haven. I'd worked there part-time before the library cut my hours, shelving books and chatting with customers about their favorite stories. When the unseen took off, the owner, Mr. Thompson, offered me a partnership. My earnings from the book were enough to buy in, and together, we'd planned the signing as a celebration, not just of the book, but of stories that matter. I'd insisted on a community-focused free coffee, a table for local writers, and a donation box for literacy programs. This wasn't about me alone. It was about lifting up everyone who'd been overlooked. The night of the signing, I stood behind a table stacked with copies of The Unseen, my blazer pressed, my scarf a pop of color against my nerves. The bookstore was packed neighbors, strangers, even a reporter from the local paper. My kids, Sarah and Tom, were there, their faces a mix of pride and shock. They'd only learned I was E.L. Harper a week ago, when I'd finally told them, "Mom, you wrote a bestseller?" Sarah had asked, her voice breaking. I'd nodded, tears in my eyes, and for the first time, I saw them look at me, not just as mom, but as someone whole. The book club arrived together, a hesitant cluster near the door. Margaret's eyes darted around, avoiding mine. Susan gave a small wave, her expression soft but guilty. Claire, clutching her phone, looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Linda and the others hovered, unsure. I welcomed the crowd, my voice steady despite the butterflies. Thank you for coming to celebrate the unseen. This book is for anyone who's ever felt invisible, who's been told their story doesn't matter. Tonight, we're here to prove it does. I read a passage from the book, one where Clara confronts her family, not with anger, but with quiet strength. The room was silent, every word landing like a stone in still water. When I finished, the applause was warm, heartfelt, and I felt my grandmother's spirit in me, her voice whispering, "Never let them see you break." Then I opened the floor for questions, and Susan raised her hand. Harper Ellen, how did you find the courage to write this?" I took a breath, my eyes flicking to Margaret. It wasn't courage at first, it was pain. I wrote because I had to, because someone I trusted made me feel like I didn't belong. That pain became a story, and that story became a way to connect with others who felt the same. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others wiping their eyes. Margaret looked down, her hands twisting in her lap. Claire stood, her voice sharp. "So, this is about getting back at people. Then, using your book to shame us." The room tensed, and I felt every eye on me. I smiled, not the soft smile of the old Ellen, but one with an edge. "It's not about shame, Claire. It's about truth. I wrote what I knew, and if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's the point." The reporter jumped in, sensing the drama. "Ellen, there's a dedication in the book to the Oak Street Book Club. Can you tell us about that?" This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. I held up my copy, the dedication page open. I dedicated this book to the women who taught me what it means to be unseen. They didn't know they were part of my story, but they inspired it. They showed me that when you're pushed out, you don't have to stay out. You can build something bigger. The crowd erupted in applause, louder this time, and I saw tears in Susan's eyes. Pride in my kids, Margaret's face, was unreadable, but I didn't care. I'd said what I needed to say. The signing went on, with people lining up for books, sharing their own stories of being overlooked. A woman my age hugged me, whispering, "You wrote my life." A young man said he'd bought the book for his mother, who'd given up her dreams for her family. Each word was a reminder that this was bigger than revenge. It was a movement. But the night held one last surprise, one that would tie my story to the community in a way even I hadn't expected. As the crowd thinned, I looked at Margaret, wondering if she'd stay or slip away. Her choice would shape how this ended, and I was ready for whatever came next. As the bookstore signing wound down, the air was warm with chatter and the clink of coffee cups. People lingered, sharing stories, their copies of The Unseen tucked under their arms like treasures. My kids, Sarah and Tom, helped stack chairs, their smiles brighter than I'd seen in years. The reporter from the local paper jotted notes, promising a feature on the librarian who became a literary star. But my eyes kept drifting to Margaret, who hadn't moved from her seat near the door. She looked smaller somehow, her hands folded tightly, her face a map of conflicting emotions. Guilt, awe, maybe even pride. I signed the last book, my hand steady, but my heart racing. The crowd had thinned, leaving just a few stragglers, including the book club. Susan approached, her eyes red. "Ellen, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't realize how much we hurt you. Your book, it's like you gave us a mirror to see ourselves. I want to do better." Her words were genuine, and I felt a pang of the old Ellen, the one who'd always forgiven. "Thank you, Susan," I said. "Come back to the bookstore. Let's start there." Linda and the others hovered, offering awkward apologies, their copies of The Unseen clutched like lifelines. Claire, though, stayed back, her arms crossed, her face a mix of defiance and embarrassment. I didn't push her. Some people need time to face their own reflection, and I'd learned not to force it. But Margaret was different. She was my history, my heart, and her silence cut deeper than anyone's words. I walked over, sitting across from her. "Margaret," I said softly, "you don't have to say anything, but I'm here if you want to." She looked up, her eyes glistening. "Ellen, I didn't know. I thought I was keeping things easy, keeping the group happy." "I didn't see you." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw the girl I'd known in high school, The one who'd cried with me over broken hearts and bad grades. I was wrong, she said. I'm so proud of you, but I don't know how to fix this. I took a breath, my anger softening, but not gone. You can't undo that night, I said. But you can choose what happens next. I wrote the unseen because you made me feel invisible. But it's not just my story. It's every woman who's been pushed aside, told she's too old to matter. You can help tell it, too. I slid an envelope across the table, the same kind I'd shown at the book club. This is an invitation to join the bookstore's new reading circle. Not my old one, but a new one, for everyone who wants to listen. Margaret opened the envelope, her fingers trembling. Inside was a flyer for the Unseen Readers, a group I'd started for women like us middle-aged, overlooked, but full of stories. You're doing this, she asked, her voice small. I nodded. It's not about being the loudest or the youngest. It's about showing up, hearing each other. You're welcome. If you want to be. She didn't answer right away, but she took the flyer, tucking it into her purse. I'll think about it, she said. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of the old Margaret, the one who'd believed in me before life got in the way. I didn't need her to beg or grovel. I'd already won, not by tearing her down, but by building something bigger than our fight. As the bookstore emptied, Mr. Thompson, my business partner, pulled me aside. Ellen, we're sold out, he said, grinning, and a publisher from Cleveland called. They want to talk about a second book. My heart leapt, but I kept my cool, nodding like it was just another day. Inside, I was soaring. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning, walking home under the Ohio stars. I thought about what this all meant. I'd turned betrayal into a bestseller, pain into purpose. But more than that, I'd learned something my grandmother knew. Something my mother lived. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to keep going, keep creating, keep believing in your own story. Ageism, betrayal, invisibility, they're real. But they're not the end. They're the spark that lights the fire. To anyone watching, anyone who's felt pushed out or forgotten, here's what I've learned. Your story matters, no matter how old you are or how quiet you've been. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Write it, share it, live it. And if you're ever in Ohio, stop by the open page, bring your story. We'll be waiting.